Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 25th of September. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that easily online by going to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. The weather info line is another way to get your forecast and warning information anytime at 800-472-0391. Find information about recent snowfall on Facebook, as well as gusty winds and other occurrences going on around Alaska with the weather. And you can certainly send us your photos there as well. We'd love to see those and your weather reports. You can find us on Twitter using the hashtag AKwx. And of course on YouTube, you'll get your daily afternoon map briefing around 4 o'clock or so in the afternoon. Here are the weather headlines as we see them at this hour. High surf conditions continue in northwestern Alaska, but we do expect to see some slow improvement tonight. By tomorrow morning, it should be substantially improved, but in the meantime, beach erosion is certainly possible there with high surf conditions continuing. Wind and snow will continue for the interior. That looks like that wind and the accumulating snow could last easily until early tomorrow morning in some cases. We'll talk about some of the snow totals in just a few moments. Gusty winds and rain will continue for the Cook Inlet as the same storm, a different part of it, will be moving through south central, and more is on the way as we get into the weekend. And it looks like a rainy weekend for southeast. The good news for southeast is that most of it looks to be generally or garden variety kind of rain. Even though most of the gardens are probably done, most of the heavier precipitation will probably be found across the higher terrain as we go through the weekend. Take a look at the snow report. The winter weather advisory continues for the middle Tanana Valley as well as parts of the central interior. We'll check that map here in just a minute. But so far this afternoon, it looks like the big winner is just north of College in around the Fairbanks area. 9 inches of snow there just today, 7 inches just 2 miles northwest of College. Officially at the airport, you have 6.7 inches as of earlier this afternoon, 6.5 inches in College itself, 5.4 inches around Fox, 4 inches for 3 miles area just 3 miles east and southeast of Fairbanks, and about 4 inches around the Two Rivers community as well. So if snow is falling, probably some higher amounts up in the hills there, and some of the 7 to 9 inch amounts probably represent what we've seen in those regions. Now, winter weather advisories will continue for the Healy and Denali National Park region as well as the middle Tanana Valley. Look for significantly less snowfall, though, east and southeast of North Pole. So snowfall amounts there will quickly taper off as you head southeast from Fairbanks. Around the Bettles region, look for a winter weather advisory there to continue until the early morning hours, and a new advisory for the north slopes of the Brooks Range. There could see 3 to 5 inches of snow as well as some gusty winds. Those winds for all of the interior could run around 40 miles per hour or so, so that could temporarily reduce visibility and blow some of that snow around. For the northwestern coast, as well as Kotzebue Sound and the northern sections of the Seward Peninsula coastline, as well as Shishmaref to Cape Espenberg, especially Shishmaref to Cape Espenberg, in fact, we're watching for some of the stronger winds and higher waves, or the wave action, to continue through the late afternoon and early evening hours. Now, as we go into tonight, the high surf advisories will still be in effect, but it looks like conditions will gradually subside as we head into the overnight hours and early tomorrow morning. So look for rapid improvement, and you'll see that on the marine forecast here when we talk about your winds in just a little bit. So we have winter weather advisories for the interior and the north slope, and high surf advisories continue for the northwestern coast and parts of Kotzebue Sound and the northern sections of the Seward Peninsula as well as the Baldwin Peninsula. That continues tonight. Here's a look at the weather picture now. The Bering Sea satellite shows low pressure working up out of the North Pacific. This is gradually going to steer its way into the southern Bering Sea. With this comes a very large mass of warm and wet air. A lot of this is going to spread out from west to east across southern Alaska. Up north, we have the influence of a northerly storm that's pushing its way into the coastal plain right now, so you're getting that northwesterly push into the Kotzebue Sound region. So the main focus going ahead for most of the state really will be what is driving this area of low pressure northward and what it does to especially the southern 2/3 of Alaska and eventually into southeast as well. A look at the rest of the state shows that southeast has had a fairly tame day, let's say. Widely scattered showers across southern parts of southeast, just hit and miss rainfall from time to time. You can see a lot of the cloud cover spreading out across the southern Bering and into south central Alaska. And up north, low pressure has been pushing in those northwesterly winds and really blossoming the clouds right across the middle interior. From southwest to northeast. We even saw some light snow and reduced visibility, not horrible, but reduced visibility around Talkeetna. So snow has made its way south of the Alaska range as well, and all this region right in here has really seen a lot of that snow growth during the day. Here's a look at the weather map now, and low pressure just inside of Kotzebue Sound, very near the Noatak and Kobuk valleys, producing some light snow earlier today. Gusty winds along with that coming in. Behind that, warm enough for some rain out across the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and right around Point Hope. The frontal boundary is working its way across the coastal plain. Snow continues for the north slope and again for the interior, and then quickly becomes rainfall again across southwestern Alaska into Bristol Bay, reaching into Shelikof Strait, and across the southern Bering and for the central chain. Colder air is working across the central Bering, but it's got a way to go before it reaches as far south as southeastern Alaska. But as we get into tonight, you can see several of those waves are trying to stretch out across the western parts of Canada, and one warmer push will work its way across into the eastern Gulf. With that, we might see a slightly better chance for light rain to develop, but there's a lot more coming for Saturday and Sunday. Scattered snow showers will continue for some of the higher terrain in the eastern Alaska range as well as the middle interior, but look for most of the snow to start winding down through the nighttime hours and tomorrow. And light snow continues for the North Slope, where the winter weather advisory continues there. For southwestern Alaska, pockets of rainfall will spread out along a frontal boundary. There's several waves here, so we've got one wave working into the northern Gulf tonight, and the main core of this still out across the west. That creeps eastward a little bit more, and a new wave develops across southwestern Alaska. With that, a little bit of a break in the action for the Gulf, but rain starts to focus a little bit more on the higher terrain for southeast as high pressure develops across some of the lower interior areas in the east. 1013 millibar high there is not quite strong enough to shut all of this down, but it means a lot of this is going to have to go on the southern side. Snow showers will focus on the north slope and some of the northern summits there of the Brooks Range as cooler air starts to trek eastward and high pressure settles in from the west. And as that happens, places in the northwestern coastline will see a rapid reduction in those winds and eventually then the seas. So again, rapid improvement expected there tomorrow. Here comes the rain for Sunday, and you'll notice the low pressure system works its way up just south of Norton Sound at 989 millibars. That's going to keep most areas in southwestern Alaska, the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island warm enough for rain. The back side of this, at least south of St. Lawrence Island, looks to be rain. But once you get into the southern coastlines of the Seward Peninsula, including Nome, probably very close to Unalakleet, and into the upper Kuskokwim Valley, as well as some areas from Healy out toward Denali National Park, and then north and west, maybe as close to Fairbanks as Tanana, you're going to see a rain and snow mix, probably starting out as snow and then maybe trending back toward rain. But it's going to be flirting with that rain and snow line for a good part of the day. So if it ends up being all snow, don't be really surprised, because the storm track could change and the amount of warmth or lack of warmth could really make a big difference in exactly what you see where you are. On the northern side of this, snow is expected across the Seward Peninsula and eastward into Ambler and Bettles, but probably just north of Fairbanks. So right now, the forecast for Fairbanks for Sunday looks fairly dry, but a lot of things going on in the hills and to your west, north, and south. The rain is going to move into southeast as well, and it looks like still that's pretty garden variety stuff. But once this wave ejects a little bit further eastward early next week, so maybe Monday night into Tuesday, that could crank up the rain amounts just a little bit more. So the weekend may be soggy and dreary and wet for southeast, but in general, garden variety. Early next week, things could change and get a little bit heavier, so plan for that. As we get into the temperatures for southeast, you'll notice most areas were in the upper 50s, many more in the lower to mid 50s, in fact. Upper 40s for a few places like Haines and out toward Craig and Klawock, a little bit cooler as you head inland where we saw a few showers, but lower to mid 50s for most on the outer coast. 49 for Cordova, 45 in Valdez, lower 50s for a good chunk of the Kenai Peninsula. 47 in Anchorage today. Talkeetna hovered in the mid 30s, again seeing some snow and reduced visibility there. 32 in Fairbanks, 41 in Eagle, and 34 in Fort Yukon. The North Slope saw temps in the mid 20s at their coldest places for Arctic Village and Anaktuvuk Pass. Lower to mid 30s for the Arctic Coast, 38 in Wainwright as well as Kivalina today, and gusty winds around Shishmaref and Tin City, 35 degrees there, 39 in Nome, with lower 40s for Unalakleet, 45 in Grayling, 43 in McGrath, 49 just shy of 50 in Bethel today, and only 39 St. Lawrence around Gamble. The mid-50s were seen around Dillingham today. King Salmon was only 50 degrees. About 50 for St. Paul and St. George, with the Alaska Peninsula in the lower to mid-50s. Sandpoint 55. 57 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Pretty mild day there as well for Adak and Atka, and 52 at Attu, with upper 50s around Kodiak today. Now, overnight lows across the North Slope will drop into the upper 20s and lower 30s thanks to the wind blowing. It shouldn't be terribly cold, but it may feel colder than it actually is, and closer to 20 for some of the higher terrain where snow is falling. Low to mid 30s for most of Norton Sound, 30 in Nome, with mid 30s around Bristol Bay, including Dillingham and King Salmon. Kodiak Island 47, closer to 50 for the Alaska Peninsula, and lower 50s for the chain. Mid to upper 40s for southeast, and you're looking at temperatures at or below freezing for most of the Matanuska and Susitna valleys tonight. The wind may help to keep temperatures up a little bit for you, and look for high temperatures tomorrow in the upper 40s to lower 50s, with heat building in and rapidly so for the eastern chain and southwestern Alaska. 50s and 60s there. That will move quickly in from the south and west to south central by Sunday. Upper 40s and lower 50s for southeast. The interior, though, hovers in the mid 30s as we go throughout your Saturday. 36 or so around Fairbanks, 24 in Anaktuvuk Pass, and back to the freezing point or close to it for Barrow at 31. Nome's looking at 36. Bethel holding in the lower 40s for Saturday. The winds will continue, and poor visibility is a threat. For IFR conditions into Bristol Bay and all the way across the southern Bering, including the Pribilofs and most of the Aleutians, especially the Pacific side, look for MVFR through most of Kodiak Island, and pockets of IFR over the higher terrain there for south central. And look for IFR conditions to develop, especially in the afternoon for areas around Haines and Skagway. Elsewhere, MVFR conditions, especially in the southern parts of the chain, but improving conditions for the interior and the north and west. Here are your pass conditions for Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass. We expect developing areas of VFR by the afternoon, so improvement will be seen there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass may hold, especially on the western side, at IFR conditions through most of your Saturday. Rainy Pass, we expect to see MVFR conditions through most of the day. Windy Pass right now looks to be okay. There may be some turbulence there, but VFR conditions for visibility. And Isabel Pass probably looking at VFR conditions by the late afternoon, but starting out a little bit lower during the day. Mentasta Pass should see improvements during your Saturday. Tonita Pass will hold at MVFR conditions through a good chunk of your Saturday, and Portage Pass may worsen on the sound side. IFR conditions there, but there will be rain on the western side too, and gusty winds coming up the Cook Inlet. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to at least get to IFR conditions by the end of the day, though that may transition during the day. So make sure you check your conditions and flight weather before you take off there, because conditions will be changing there throughout the day. Freezing levels show the cold air making a pretty big impact across the interior. No wonder it's snowing in Fairbanks with the moisture moving through, but you can see how it's really squashing that temperature gradient in the areas in the upper atmosphere. So the freezing levels aloft range from about south central and southwestern Alaska to Kodiak Island, seeing levels between 2 and 10,000 feet tomorrow, and about 2 to 4,000 feet across southeastern Alaska. Icing potential generally above 10,000 feet. There's a lot of warm and wet air there, but it's not terribly cold to get into that really good icing potential across southwest and south central. That wasn't the case today across the interior, where of course you saw some snow. Across southeast, above 10,000 feet for the central and southern parts of the Panhandle, and for St. Paul, St. George, and the St. Matthew Island waters, as well as some areas around Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. You'll have to go above 10,000 feet there. Here's a look at the jet stream, and no wonder things are cranked up across the interior. We're getting a really good blast of air across the upper atmosphere, and that is helping to add a little bit of extra lift, which develops the clouds, which allows the precipitation to fall, and then you get snow if their air is cold enough in places like Fairbanks, which it is today. We've got a trough of low pressure out across the west, but you can see this pattern's kind of changing up a little bit. We have an overall pattern coming in from the west and northwest now, but that southwesterly flow is really trying to take the game away and start to warm things up from southwest to northeast. As we look at 9,000 feet, you can see that southwesterly flow has already picked up there, with winds around 30 to 45 knots. Wind speeds for southeast still holding around 15 to 20 knots, maybe a little stronger in the north, up to 40 knots, but those are also coming in from the due west. Across the west coast and north slope, 15 to even 10 knots there across the north from the west and southwest. For 3,000 feet, wind speeds still holding around 20 to 30 knots across the northern Gulf and southeast. For southwest and Kodiak Island, about 30 knots there. Southwesterlies coming across the chain into the west coast at 30 to 40 knots, slowing down as they get closer to home. And light winds developing across Norton Sound and over the Yukon Valley. They're coming in also from the west, and we still have a northwesterly flow coming into the north and western coast, but again, conditions should be improving quickly as we go throughout the daytime tomorrow. All that said, though, with the storm cranking up out across the Bering Sea as we head through the weekend, there will be developing areas of turbulence, not just Saturday, but also Sunday, and some of that could reach occasional moderate for southwestern Alaska into the Kilbucks and across some of the Aleutian chain into the central and eastern chain, generally below 4,000 feet. Watch for light chop across the outer coastline and some of the gap-prone areas in southeast below 6,000 feet, and still watching an occasional moderate area across the far eastern sections of the North Slope. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage. On behalf of Alaska Public Media, thank you for watching Hangar Flying. This evening, we are very pleased and humbled to have Ms. Kelly Atlee on the show. She is the sister of Dale Carlson, who was flying a Cessna 180 in Prince William Sound on April 15, 2015. He reported a loss of engine power, and then communications with Anchorage Center were lost. He was on an instrument flight plan, and he had an emergency locator transmitter and a satellite tracking device. They transmitted his location, and a search was immediately initiated. Sadly, his remains were found the next day on Culross Island. Kelly, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, my sympathies to you and your family for your loss.
Thank you.
Our goal tonight is to talk about the foundation that the family has set up to provide satellite tracking devices to pilots. But let's start with talking a little bit about why the family is doing this.
We think that the satellite tracking device, specifically the SpiderTrax device, is an essential safety feature. My brother Dale had been a pilot for 37 years. He had flown in excess of 1,500 hours with no incidents, and he was a safety guy. He flew with an ELT. He flew with a full survival kit. He had a GPS, he was instrument rated, and he had a float rating, and he had a SpiderTrax device, and that was an important part.
I know from speaking with the family that he was also a firm believer in staying current and being proficient. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, about what types of qualifications we're looking for pilots. But I do want to stress that Dale did everything that he could to be a safe pilot.
Absolutely, yeah, he was most definitely a safety guy, like I said, and he had had the SpiderTrax unit for about 4 years, and he had reached a point in his life where he was able to commit more time to flying, and part of the agreement that he made with his wife Heather and his son John was that he would fly with a SpiderTrax unit, and of course that made my mom and my dad and my brother very happy, gave us great peace of mind.
So not only for the pilot to know that they can have a search and rescue initiated and their location pinpointed, the relief that it provides to families is hugely important.
It is so important, and like I said, we just feel like it's essential. You know, prior to the accident, it gave us all, specifically Heather and John, because they were always well aware of exactly when he took off, exactly where he was every 2 minutes. They knew when he landed, and it was great peace of mind. And then post-accident, we firmly believe that that's the only reason they were able to recover Dale's body, is because John and Heather were able to give them very specific coordinates to begin the search and rescue, and ultimately to recover his body.
So let's talk about how the family is transferring this belief in SpiderTrax to helping other pilots obtain these devices.
Well, again, to go back to the fact that we think it's just an essential safety feature, we are looking specifically to support new pilots. You know, we kind of feel like established pilots have the funds necessary to outfit their planes with all of the essential safety features. New pilots don't necessarily have those funds available, so we don't want them to have to make a choice between what safety features can I afford. We would love for everybody to have a spider track unit in the plane.
That is, I think, a great thing that you're doing in taking something sad and negative and turning it into something positive. So I know that this was something that the Carlson family thought up, and they worked in conjunction with the folks at Spider Tracks, Northern Lights Avionics, the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, the Alaska Airmen's Association, and they're all involved in this program to provide spider tracks to new pilots. How do you think this is going to help pilots both realize safety features and the importance of spider tracks?
You know, when this idea first evolved, it was very soon after they recovered my brother's body, and his wife Heather and his son John just immediately decided that we need to do what we can to help all pilots have peace of mind. So it was great to get the involvement of all those organizations, and we're just grateful to have this opportunity.
Well, I thank you very much for being our guest on our show, and again, my sympathies to you and your family.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Kelly. We would like to invite you back to our next Hangar Flying show, where we will speak with Kelly some more, and we'll go over some of the details for applying for the Spider Tracks devices. In the meantime, fly safely.
The sea ice edge has been updated today at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php, and you can see more grease ice has formed across the coastal areas of the Beaufort Seacoast. Some of this still old ice from last season. The ice about 50 to 60 nautical miles north of Barrow is expanding slowly. It's growing even faster further north, of course. We still see a little bit of grease ice close to Point Lay. Anytime you'd like to check on the conditions there, as well as the 5-day outlook, you can do so at the web address on your screen there. But one thing to note is a lot of this ice is going to be moving around an awful lot as we go through the weekend, thanks to the changing winds from south and then back to north and then back to west. So watch and prepare for changing conditions across the North Slope and across coastal areas, especially east of Barrow to about Prudhoe Bay through the weekend. Now looking back towards southeast, southerlies will be working through the inner coast, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea, and westerlies from Yakutat all the way down to Sitka with a 25-knot wind and 7 to 8-foot seas there on Saturday. Look for a little shift on the inside as we get into Sunday. South and southeasterlies developing at about 15 to 20 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas, and south and southwesterlies from Icy Cape and down toward Yakutat out toward Craig with more of a westerly flow coming into the Dixon entrance with an 8-foot sea. For south central, variable wind inside of Prince William Sound, but that becomes north and westerly very quickly once you get outside of the Hitchinbrook entrance. Look for 20 to 25 knots and 6 to 8-foot seas in the north and western coast. Cook Inlet looking at a north and easterly wind coming down about 10 to as much as 20 knots south of Calgan Island, and then opposing that is a stronger southwesterly flow west of the Barrens and through Shelikof Strait at 20 to 25 knots, 30 knots on the other side of Kodiak Island with a 9-foot sea. For Sunday, we still have an east and northeasterly wind coming down Cook Inlet, south and easterly winds rounding Kodiak Island at 20 to 25 knots, and southeasterlies coming into the northern Gulf at 15 to 25 knots, easterlies inside of Prince William Sound at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. For the Alaska Peninsula, south and westerlies coming through. On the Bering Sea coast, 25 knots with 7 to 8-foot seas coming into Bristol Bay, and 9-foot seas along the Pacific coast with a 30-knot wind for Saturday. For Sunday, everyone's looking at a southwesterly wind, 20 knots on the Bering Sea coast and Bristol Bay, 5 to 6-foot seas, and 9-foot seas for the Pacific coastline from Castle Cape all the way west toward Falls Pass. For the Aleutians, look for a very broad southerly flow as low pressure is organizing and shifting northward into the south and western Bering Sea. That means a northwesterly wind for Attu and Shemya. Look for a 10-foot sea there. 20 to 25 knots elsewhere at a southerly flow with 6 to 7-foot seas on the Bering and 9 to 10-foot seas for the Pacific coast. As we get into Sunday, southwesterlies for the central and eastern chain, 20 to 30 knots there with a north wind developing from Kiska to Adak and all the way out toward Shemya with a 30-knot wind. 11 to 13-foot seas are likely there. Otherwise, 6 to 8-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast and 9-foot seas for the Pacific. Across the west coast, northeasterlies coming off the shore then, blowing through St. Lawrence Island and north of Nunivak Island at 25 to 30 knots with 6 to 9-foot seas. South and westerlies for the upper Kuskokwim and the Pribilofs. Look for 8-foot seas there on a 20 to 25-knot wind. North and easterly winds pick up just a little bit more on Sunday, 30 knots with 7 to 10-foot seas and 20 to 25 knots for the upper Kuskokwim and the Pribilofs, looking for 6 to 7-foot seas. Sorry, this Kuskokwim Bay. I keep saying upper Kuskokwim. That would be way up here. Not looking for seas inland, but we are looking for seas offshore from 6 to 7-foot seas. Now up north, you're wondering about the winds, and much improvement is promised with north and westerlies coming down the northwestern coast. 20 to as low as 15 knots from Cape Lisburne to Point Hope, 7-foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound with a north wind at 20 knots, and north and westerlies coming across the Beaufort Sea coast, 15 to 20 knots there. You'll notice the wind's shifting around again. That means any ice is going to be shifting along with it. Southeast wind from Wainwright to Point Lay, 10 knots. Northeasterlies coming down Cape Lisburne and strengthening a little bit inside of Kotzebue Sound at 20 knots with a 5-foot sea. But north and westerlies will be coming down the Beaufort Sea coast from 10 to 15 knots with a 3 to 4-foot sea there on Sunday. That's a look at your marine weather. Let's recap what's going on around the interior areas, including the upper Kuskokwim. A look for scattered snow showers to continue. Some of that a little bit heavier on the north slope and the Brooks Range. Winter weather advisories posted there through the morning. Look for about 3 to 5 inches of snow there. The big factor is going to be the wind blowing a lot of this through the region, including the Copper River Basin and the eastern interior. Otherwise, light rainfall across the south coast and southwest, where the winds and warmer weather will be spreading in from the south and west through the weekend. Snow showers continue in the north. Rain starts to fan out and move into southeastern Alaska, but it looks like mainly garden variety for you. And rain and snow is expected for some parts of the western interior and south central. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.